Welcome back to the Sarah Werewolf Romance collection, where the alphas are fiercely possessive and the heroines never back down from a fight. Quick question for the pack before we dive into today's chaos. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments and drop a paw print emoji if you have a tiny, fluffy dictator of a pet currently judging your audiobook choices. Today, we have a special one. It's funny, it's intense, and it involves a fiercely independent security expert who literally tells a billionaire alpha CEO to bite me. But before we get to the standoff, if you want to support the channel and get early access to stories exactly like this, hit that join button down below. It helps us keep the servers running and the romance flowing. Now, take a deep breath, grab your headphones, and get ready. The alpha has met his match, and she brought a steel pipe. Let's get into the story. Chapter 1. The air in the back room of Shirley's shop smelled like solder and cold coffee. She sat hunched over a workbench, her eyes locked on a circuit board. A tiny screwdriver was tucked into her messy bun, keeping a stray lock of hair from falling into her face. She was deep into a line of code for a new biometric lock when the bells over the front door chimed. Shirley didn't look up. "I'm closed for lunch," she called out. Her voice was clear and firm. "Come back at 2. She heard footsteps. They weren't the normal shuffling steps of a customer. These were heavy. They had a steady rhythm that made the small metal parts on her table vibrate. A shadow fell over her work, blocking the bright LED lamp she used for her repairs. "I don't have time to wait until 2, a voice said. It was a deep, smooth baritone that felt like a low hum against her skin. Shirley finally looked up. Standing in the doorway of her workshop was a man who looked like he had walked off the cover of a business magazine. He was tall, with shoulders that seemed too wide for the frame of the door. He wore a charcoal suit that fit his lean, muscular frame perfectly. His hair was dark and a bit messy, like he had just run his hands through it in frustration. But it was his eyes that stopped her. They were a deep, rich amber, and they stayed fixed on her with a focus that felt like a physical push. Shirley's thought, "Great, another guy in a suit who thinks his time is the only time that matters." "The sign on the door says closed," Shirley said, setting her tools down. She stood up, noticing she had to tilt her head back quite a bit to look him in the eye. "And the lock on that door was supposed to be engaged. How did you get in?" The man tilted his head. He didn't look sorry. "The deadbolt was a Series 4. I used a tension wrench and a bit of luck." Shirley narrowed her eyes. "You picked my lock?" "I needed to see if you were as good as the rumors say," he replied. He didn't smile, but there was a spark of something in his eyes. "I'm Caleb Thorne." The name rang a bell. Caleb Thorne was the CEO of Thorne Tech, the biggest company in Azure Heights. People said he was a genius, a recluse, and a bit of a shark. To Shirley, he just looked like a man who needed a lesson in boundaries. "Well, Mr. Thorne, you've proven you can break into a small business." "Bonjour," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Now get out before I call the cops and show them how well my security cameras caught your luck." Caleb didn't move. He looked around the cramped shop, taking in the stacks of hardware, the tangles of wires, and the high-end sensors Shirley had built herself. "I have a problem that needs a very specific set of skills. My firm's private servers were flagged this morning. Someone is trying to get through my encryption." "Call an IT guy," Shirley snapped. "I have 50 IT guys," Caleb said, stepping closer. "They can't find the hole. I need a designer who thinks like a thief. I need you." Shirley crossed her arms over her chest. She could feel the heat coming off him. It was strange. The room was cool, but Caleb felt like a furnace. "I don't work for people who break into my office. It shows a lack of accountability. I like my clients to have manners. Caleb shifted his weight. For a second, his tough exterior cracked. He looked at his shoes, then back at her. I apologize. It was a test, and it was rude. But my company, is at risk. I don't care if your whole building is falling down, Shirley said, pointing toward the door. Leave. Now. Caleb stared at her for a long beat. His nostrils flared, and for a split second, his eyes seemed to glow a bit brighter. Then, he turned and walked out without another word. Shirley waited until she heard the front door click shut. She went to the door and checked the lock. It wasn't broken, but it had been bypassed. She felt a shiver run down her back that had nothing to do with fear. Caleb's thought, she's smaller than I expected, but she has the heart of a lion. I shouldn't have pushed, but I can still smell her scent on my sleeves. Chapter 2. The next morning, Shirley found a coffee cup sitting on the ledge of her shop's front window. It was from the expensive place down the street, and there was a note stuck to the side. I owe you a new lock and a better first impression. C. She threw the note away, but she drank the coffee. It was exactly how she liked it, black, with just a hint of cinnamon. An hour later, Caleb Thorne was back. This time, he knocked. He waited for her to open the door before he stepped inside. He wasn't wearing a suit today. Instead, he had on a dark t-shirt that showed off the heavy muscles in his arms and a pair of dark jeans. He looked less like a CEO and more like someone who could flip a car if he got angry. I brought the contract, he said, holding out a leather folder. Shirley didn't take it. She leaned against the doorframe. I haven't said yes. Read it first, Caleb said. He walked over to her desk and laid the folder down. I'm offering a flat fee of $50,000 for 3 days of consulting. You find the hole in my security, you patch it, and you leave. No strings. Shirley looked at the folder. That kind of money would pay her rent for 2 years. It would let her buy the new server she needed for her research. But she didn't like the way he was looking at her, like he was waiting for her to cave. Why me? She asked. There are bigger firms in the city. Bigger firms have leaks, Caleb said. His voice was low and serious. I've done my homework on you, Shirley Jones. You're independent. You don't have a boss to answer to, and you have a reputation for being the most stubborn person in Azure Heights. I trust stubborn. Shirley walked over to her desk and flipped open the folder. The terms were clear. There was a section on accountability and a strict privacy clause. It was professional. I have a condition, Shirley said. Caleb nodded. Name it. I work from my own office. You bring the hardware here. I don't go to your tower where you can hover over my shoulder. Caleb frowned. He paced the small room, his movements graceful and predatory. The data is sensitive. It shouldn't leave the building. Then find someone else, Shirley said. She picked up her screwdriver and went back to her circuit board. I don't like being managed. Caleb stopped pacing. He stood right behind her chair. She could feel the vibration of his breathing. It was steady and deep. Fine, he said. I'll have the encrypted drives delivered by noon. But I stay here while you work. Shirley spun her chair around. No way. It's my data, Caleb countered. I'm not leaving it in a shop with a lock I already know how to pick. Shirley bit her lip. She hated that he was right about the lock. Fine. But you sit in the corner, you don't touch anything, and you don't talk to me unless I ask you a question. Caleb's mouth quirked up at the corner. It wasn't a full smile, but it changed his whole face. He looked younger, almost shy. Deal. Shirley's thought, I'm going to regret this. He's going to be a distraction, and I can't afford to lose my focus on a guy who smells this good. By noon, 2 of Caleb's men who were even bigger than he was, carried in 3 heavy black cases. They set them down on her spare table. Caleb sat in a small wooden chair in the corner, looking like a giant in a dollhouse. He had a tablet in his lap, but his eyes were on her. Shirley ignored him. She cracked open the first case and started to work. Chapter 3. By 5 o'clock, Shirley's brain felt like it had been through a blender. Caleb had been true to his word. He hadn't said a peep. He just sat there, watching her work with a quiet intensity that made the back of her neck prickle. I'm done for the day, she said, stretching her arms over her head. Her shirt lifted just an inch, showing the line of her waist. Caleb stood up immediately. Did you find it? I found a trace, she said. Someone used a backdoor exploit in your cooling system's software. It's clever, but it's messy. I'll need tomorrow to track where the signal is going. Caleb nodded. He walked to the door and opened it for her. I'll walk you to your car. I can walk myself, Shirley said, grabbing her bag. I've been doing it for years. It's late, Caleb said. His voice had that alpha edge again, the one that didn't take no for an answer. The parking lot is dark. Shirley rolled her eyes but didn't fight him. She was too tired to argue. They walked out into the cool evening air. The streetlights were just flickering on, casting long shadows across the pavement. They reached her car, a 2024 Kia Rio in a soft, pale color called lavender mist. It was clean and shiny, a sharp contrast to the dark, expensive SUV parked 3 spots down. Caleb stopped and looked at the car. Lavender? It was the only color they had in stock that wasn't gray, Shirley said, clicking her key fob. The lights flashed. And I like it. It's easy to find in a crowd. Caleb stepped closer to her. The wind shifted, blowing his scent toward her. It was woodsy and clean, like a forest after a storm. Caleb's thought. I can smell the mint on her breath and the scent of her skin. It's making my wolf restless. I want to pull her close and never let go. It suits you, Caleb said softly. Shirley paused, her hand on the door handle. What does that mean? It's bright, he said. It doesn't try to be something it's not. Shirley felt a flush creep up her neck. She cleared her throat and hopped into the driver's seat. Right. Well, thanks for the walk. I'll see you tomorrow at 8. Don't be late. She backed out of the spot and drove away, watching him in her rearview mirror. He stayed standing in the middle of the lot, watching her until she turned the corner. She drove toward her loft, her heart beating a little faster than usual. She told herself it was just the caffeine from the coffee he'd bought her. She parked her Kia in the gated lot of her building and headed upstairs. She lived in a converted warehouse in a part of town that was still a bit rough around the edges, but she had reinforced the doors and windows herself. As soon as she opened the door, a white blur hit her ankles. Hey, Pixie! Shirley laughed, picking up the tiny Pomeranian. Pixie let out a series of sharp, bossy barks, demanding to be fed. Shirley set her down and headed for the kitchen, but she stopped when she saw her balcony door. She had left it locked, she was sure of it. But now, it was cracked open, just an inch. Chapter 4. Shirley froze. Her hand went to her bag, gripping the heavy steel flashlight she always carried. She didn't breathe. She scanned the room, looking for any sign of movement. Pixie stopped barking. The dog's ears went flat against her head, and she let out a low, vibrating growl that Shirley had never heard before. Pixie wasn't looking at the balcony. She was looking at the front door. A heavy thud sounded from the hallway. Then, the sound of wood splintering. Shirley didn't wait. She grabbed Pixie and ran for the bathroom, the only room with a reinforced steel frame. She slammed the door and turned the bolt, her heart hammering a frantic, heavy rhythm against her ribs. Shirley's thought, I should have taken that security contract more seriously. This isn't about a hack anymore. Outside the bathroom door, she heard a crash. Something heavy hit her coffee table. Then a snarl, a sound so wild and deep it didn't sound human. It was followed by the sound of glass shattering. "Shirley!" The voice was Caleb's. It was a roar that shook the walls. She heard the sound of a struggle. It was brutal and fast. Bodies hit the floor, and there was a sound of tearing fabric and more snarling. Then, silence. "Shirley, open the door. It's me." Caleb's voice was ragged. He sounded like he had just run a marathon. Shirley waited. She gripped her flashlight, ready to swing. "How do I know it's you?" "Because your dog is currently biting my shoe," Caleb said, his voice sounding strained. Shirley slowly unlocked the door and cracked it open. Caleb was standing in her living room. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, and there were 3 deep red gashes across his chest. His eyes were still that strange, glowing amber, and his face was tight with a rage that looked terrifying. On the floor near the balcony, a man was crumpled in a heap. He was huge, dressed in dark clothes, but he wasn't moving. "Who is that?" Shirley asked, her voice shaking. Caleb didn't look at the man. He looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her to make sure she wasn't hurt. "A mistake," he said. "He won't be coming back." He took a step toward her, but Shirley held up the flashlight. "Stop right there," she said. "You followed me. You knew someone was coming. You used me as bait." Caleb stopped. He looked hurt by the accusation. "I didn't use you. I smelled him near your shop. I followed you because I wanted to make sure you were safe." "You broke into my building!" Shirley shouted. "The door was already open," Caleb said, pointing to the hallway. "He kicked it in. I just got here in time to stop him from getting to you." Shirley looked at the front door. The frame was shattered. Caleb was right. Someone had forced their way in. She looked back at him, seeing the blood soaking into his torn shirt. "You're bleeding," she said, her voice softening just a bit. Caleb looked down at his chest as if he'd just noticed the wounds. "It's fine. It'll heal." "Not in my bathroom it won't," Shirley said, finding her courage. She stepped out and pointed to her sofa. "Sit down. I have a first aid kit. And then you are going to tell me exactly what is going on, or I'm calling the police and telling them you both broke in." Caleb sat. He looked at Pixie, who was still growling at his feet. Caleb's thought, I almost lost her. If I hadn't followed my gut, she'd be dead. I don't care about the secret anymore. I have to tell her what I am. Caleb looked up at her, his amber eyes locking onto hers. "You might want to sit down first, Shirley. This is going to be a long night." Chapter 5. The living room felt cramped, even with a hole where the front door used to be. Splintered oak littered the rug, and the scent of bitter ash from the unconscious rogue still hung in the air. Shirley gripped her steel flashlight like a mace. She watched Caleb sink onto her sofa. The cushions groaned under his weight. Blood from the gashes on his chest began to stain the gray fabric, a dark, wet bloom that made her stomach do a slow roll. "You're making a mess of my furniture," Shirley said. Her voice shook, but she kept her chin high. "And you still haven't explained why a giant with claws just tried to turn me into confetti." Caleb leaned his head back against the sofa. His skin looked pale, though his eyes remained a sharp, glowing amber. He's a rogue, a stray who doesn't follow the rules of the crest. He thought you were a weak point. He thought he could use you to get to me. I am not a weak point, Shirley snapped. She paced the floor, stepping over a piece of the shattered doorframe. I am a professional. I have a 5-star rating on every freelance site in the city. I don't do weak. What I do is security, and right now, my security is a joke because of you. Caleb's jaw tightened. I saved your life, Shirley. You brought the fire to my porch, she countered. She stopped in front of him, her shadow stretching across his torn shirt. You didn't just hire me for a hack. You hired me to be a target. You lied by omission, Caleb. In my book, that's just as bad as a straight-up lie. Where's the accountability? Where's the respect for the person doing the work? Caleb stood up. He moved with a sudden, fluid grace that ignored the wounds on his chest. He was a head taller than her, his presence filling the room until the air felt thick and hard to breathe. He looked down at her, his nostrils flaring. I am trying to protect what belongs to the pack, he growled. The sound wasn't quite human. It had a vibration to it that made the floorboards under Shirley's feet hum. It was a command, a push that told her to shut up and listen. Shirley didn't flinch. She stepped into his space, her nose inches from his chest. I don't belong to any pack. I belong to me. And if you think you can just bark at me and I'll roll over, you've got the wrong girl. If you're so hungry for something to chew on, why don't you just bite me and get it over with? The room went silent. Even Pixie stopped her frantic sniffing of the rogue's boots. Caleb's eyes didn't just flash. They ignited. The molten gold in his irises seemed to swirl. He leaned down, his face a hair's breadth from hers. She could feel the heat radiating from his skin, smelling the sandalwood and the sharp copper tang of his blood. Where? He whispered. The word was a low vibration that traveled through her teeth and down her spine. It wasn't a threat. It was a question. One full of hunger and a dark, sudden interest. Shirley's thought. I told a man who just fought a monster to bite me, and now he's looking at my neck like I'm the only meal he's seen in a decade. I should be terrified, but my heart is doing a drum solo for all the wrong reasons. Chapter 6. The tension in the room snapped when Pixie let out a sudden, high-pitched sneeze. The tiny dog trotted over and began to vigorously lick the blood off Caleb's hand. Caleb jumped back as if he'd been struck by lightning. The gold in his eyes faded back to a dark amber, and he looked at the floor, his ears turning a surprising shade of pink. The Alpha, who had just stood his ground against a killer, was now staring at a 3-pound ball of white fluff with total confusion. She's getting hair in the wound, Caleb muttered. He sounded shy, the predatory edge replaced by a clumsy sort of embarrassment. Pixie, leave the man alone, Shirley said. Her voice was breathy, her lungs finally remembering how to work. She looked at the hole in her wall. The night air was pushing into the loft, bringing the sounds of distant sirens and city traffic. We have a bigger problem than your hand. My door is gone. It's midnight. I can't leave a hole in my wall in this neighborhood. Caleb looked at the shattered frame. I'll fix it. With what? Your bare hands? Shirley crossed her arms. It's a custom frame. A replacement will run at least $400, not including the labor for an emergency call-out. I have tools in my car, Caleb said. He started toward the hallway, but he winced, his hand clutching his side. The gashes on his chest were still weeping blood. You aren't doing anything except sitting back down, Shirley ordered. She pointed to the sofa. I have a first aid kit in the bathroom. I also have a sheet of plywood in the storage closet from when I was building the server racks. I'll board it up for tonight. You? You're going to bleed out on my rug if you don't stop moving." Caleb opened his mouth to argue, but Shirley gave him a look that could have curdled milk. He sank back onto the sofa, looking defeated. Shirley retreated to the bathroom. She grabbed her kit, a sturdy plastic box filled with antiseptic, gauze, and a needle she hoped she wouldn't have to use. When she came back, she found Caleb staring at Pixie. The dog had climbed onto his lap and was now curled up on his thigh, staring him down with her tongue lolling out. "She likes the heat," Shirley said, kneeling on the floor between his knees. "She's a heat thief. Don't let it go to your head." She began to clean his wounds. The gashes were deep, the skin torn in jagged lines. As she dabbed the antiseptic on, she expected him to hiss or pull away. Instead, he just watched her. His breathing was slow and steady. "You're very precise," Caleb remarked. He flinched slightly when she pressed the gauze down, but he didn't move. Most people would be screaming or calling the police by now. "I've had a lot of practice fixing things people try to break," Shirley replied. She didn't look up, focusing on the way his skin felt under her fingers. It was firm, like layered muscle, but surprisingly soft. "And I don't like involving people who don't understand the problem. The police wouldn't know what to do with a guy whose eyes turn yellow." Caleb's thought, "She's stitching me up with the same focus she uses on her circuit boards. I've spent my whole life being feared or followed, but she treats me like a puzzle she's determined to solve." "I'm a werewolf, Shirley," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Shirley didn't stop taping the bandage. "I figured. Normal guys don't walk through Series 4 locks and take a claw to the chest like it's a paper cut." She looked up, her gaze meeting his. "But being a werewolf doesn't mean you get to skip out on the bill from my door." Chapter 7. After the wounds were bandaged and the rogue was dragged into the hallway, Caleb insisted his people would collect the body. Shirley set to work on the door. She hauled a thick sheet of plywood from her closet. It was heavy, the grain of the wood rough against her palms. Caleb tried to help, but Shirley pushed him back. "Sit. Bandages stay on, Alpha. That's the rule." She used a cordless drill to secure the plywood over the shattered frame. The whine of the motor was the only sound in the room for 10 minutes. When she was finished, the loft felt like a bunker. It wasn't pretty, but it was solid. "Now," Shirley said, wiping dust from her jeans. She sat in the chair across from Caleb. Pixie was still occupying his lap, looking like she had claimed him as her personal throne. "Let's talk about accountability." Caleb straightened his posture. "I'll pay for the door. I'll pay for the sofa. I'll double your fee." "No," Shirley said, shaking her head. "I don't want a payoff. I want a contract, a real one. If I'm going to work for you, I need to know exactly what I'm walking into. No more surprises, no more rogues in my living room. If there's a threat, you tell me. If there's a pack issue, you explain it." Caleb sighed. "It's not that simple. Pack business is private. It's for our safety and yours." "How did that work out tonight?" Shirley asked, gesturing to the boarded-up door. "Privacy didn't stop that guy from coming through the balcony. Accountability means you're responsible for the risks you bring into my life. If you can't agree to that, take your encrypted drives and find another designer." Caleb looked at Pixie, then back at Shirley. He saw the fire in her eyes, the way she wasn't backing down even though she knew he could snap her in half. "I have a business," Caleb said. "Thorn Tech is the face, but the Crimson Crest is the heart. We are a pack of nearly 200 wolves in this city. I am the Alpha. That means their lives are my responsibility. Huxley, the man who sent that rogue, is a rival. He wants the territory. He wants my tech because it helps us stay hidden." "So you're a king in a suit," Shirley summarized. "I'm a leader who is tired of looking over his shoulder," Caleb corrected. He reached over to his discarded, torn jacket on the armrest and pulled a small, lead-lined box from the inner pocket. He set it on the table. "This watch belonged to my father. It's silver. I can't touch it for long without it burning me. It's broken. I want you to fix it while you work on the encryption. It's the only thing I have left of him." Shirley looked at the box. Silver. The one thing that could hurt him. He was handing her a weapon and a piece of his heart at the same time. "I'll fix it," Shirley said. "But the contract stands. You tell me everything, and you pay for the door in cash by tomorrow morning." Caleb nodded. "Deal." Shirley's thought, "He's giving me his father's watch. He's trying to show me he trusts me. I just hope I'm not making a $50,000 mistake by letting him stay." Chapter 8. The next morning, Shirley's lavender mist Kia Rio hummed as she navigated the sleek, glass-lined streets of the North District. Caleb sat in the passenger seat, looking absurdly large for the compact car. He had his knees pressed against the dashboard, and his head nearly touched the roof. "You really like this color?" Caleb asked, eyeing the lavender dashboard trim. "It's calming," Shirley said, taking a sharp turn that made Caleb grab the door handle. "And it's a 2024 model. It's reliable. Not everything has to be a tank, Caleb." "It feels like I'm sitting in a grape," Caleb muttered, though there was a hint of a smile on his lips. They pulled up to the Thorn Tech campus. It wasn't a gloomy stronghold or a dark fortress. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture. 3 buildings made of white stone and glass, surrounded by a lush green park. Security guards in crisp uniforms stood at every gate, but as the Kia approached, they didn't ask for ID. They simply bowed their heads as Caleb passed. "Welcome to the den," Caleb said as they parked. Inside, the lobby smelled like crisp, ionized air from the high-end filters and expensive floor wax. A man with sharp features and light hair met them at the elevators. He wore a tailored blue suit and carried a tablet like it was a weapon. "Caleb, you're late," the man said. He stopped, his eyes darting to the bandages showing under Caleb's fresh shirt. His nostrils flared. "You've been fighting, and you brought a human into the inner sanctum?" "Gideon, this is Shirley Jones," Caleb said, his voice taking on that heavy alpha tone. "She's the consultant. She's also my guest. Treat her with respect." Gideon looked Shirley up and down. He smelled of bitter ash and something sharp, like lemon. "The tech girl. I heard you have a temper." "I have a low tolerance for people who stand in my way," Shirley said, stepping toward him. "Are you the beta I've heard about? The one who handles the schedules? Because if so, you're 5 minutes behind on your morning brief." Gideon blinked. He looked at Caleb, who was trying very hard not to laugh. "She's feisty," Gideon remarked, a smirk finally breaking his cold mask. "I like her. Follow me. The healer is waiting in the lab. She wanted to check those gashes before you start the meeting."
They walked through a series of high-security doors that required both thumbprints and retinal scans. Shirley watched the tech with a professional eye. It was good. Very good. But she already saw 3 ways she could bypass the sensors if she had 10 minutes and a copper wire. They entered a bright white room that looked like a cross between a hospital and a greenhouse. Plants with purple flowers grew in glass cases along the walls.
And a woman with silver hair and kind eyes was preparing a blue ointment. "Caleb, sit," the woman said. "You smell like rogue filth and peppermint?" "That would be me," Shirley said, holding up her hand. The healer looked at Shirley and smiled. A human who doesn't smell like fear. Interesting. I am Elena, and if you're the one who patched him up last night, you did a decent job. But let's use something that doesn't sting quite so much. Caleb's thought, she's standing in the heart of my world, and she hasn't flinched once. My pack sees a Luna in the making, even if she only sees a paycheck. Chapter 9. The workday at Thorn Tech ended with a low hum of servers and the smell of cooling metal. Shirley had spent 8 hours staring at lines of code, her fingers flying across a keyboard that Caleb provided. By 5 o'clock, she had tracked the rogue hack to a server farm in a neighboring district. Her neck felt stiff and her eyes burned. Caleb stood by the window, his fresh white shirt crisp against his broad back. The bandages beneath were flat now, the blue ointment from Elena doing its job. Pixie sat at his feet, currently chewing on a loose thread from his expensive wool trousers. Caleb didn't even flinch. "You look like you're about to snap," Caleb said, turning around. His amber eyes softened. "Put the tablet down, Shirley. The encryption isn't going anywhere tonight." "I like to finish what I start," Shirley muttered, though she clicked the screen dark. "And Pixie is eating your pants. Just thought you should know." Caleb glanced down at the tiny dog. He let out a short, dry laugh. "She has expensive taste. I'll add it to the list of things I owe you." He stepped closer, his presence warm and steady. "I want to take you somewhere. A place for dinner. No pack business, no rogues, just a conversation." Shirley raised an eyebrow. She stood up and tucked her multi-tool into her pocket. "Is this a date, Mr. Thorne?" "Because I don't date clients. It creates a conflict of interest in the final invoice." "Consider it a peace offering for the door," Caleb countered. "And yes, it's a date." They didn't take the lavender mist Kia Rio. Caleb insisted on his SUV for logistical reasons, which surely translated to mean he wanted a tank between her and the world. He drove them to a building downtown that looked like a regular office block. They took a private elevator to the very top. When the doors opened, Shirley gasped. It wasn't a restaurant. It was a sprawling rooftop garden hidden behind glass walls. Trees with silver leaves swayed in a light breeze from hidden vents. The air smelled like damp earth and night-blooming jasmine. A single table sat in the center, lit by a cluster of hanging lanterns. "This is your somewhere?" Shirley asked, walking toward the edge. The city of Azure Heights stretched out below like a sea of neon. "It's quiet," Caleb said. He pulled out a chair for her, his movements careful. "The pack doesn't come up here. I come here when the noise in my head gets too loud." They sat, and a server, a tall man who bowed his head slightly to Caleb, brought plates of seared steak and roasted roots. Caleb watched her eat for a moment before he spoke. "Tell me about the watches," he said. "Why the old gears and springs? You're clearly a master of digital security. Why spend your time on things that require a magnifying glass?" Shirley poked at a carrot. "Because with a watch, you can see the truth. If a gear is bent, the time is wrong. You fix the gear, the problem is solved. It's about accountability. Machines don't lie. People do." She looked him in the eye. "Like my ex. He was a big picture guy. He took my designs, slapped his name on them, and then told me I was lucky to be his girlfriend." Caleb's jaw tightened. He was a fool. "He was an alpha," Shirley corrected. "Or he thought he was. He liked the power, but he hated the work. You're the real deal. But that makes you more dangerous." Shirley's thought. He's looking at me with that focused stare again, and for the first time in years, I don't feel like I have to hide my teeth just to keep my seat at the table. Chapter 10. The drive back to Shirley's loft was quiet. The plywood over her front door looked grim under the hallway's flickering fluorescent light. Caleb insisted on walking her all the way to her unit. He stood in front of the temporary wooden barrier, his large frame blocking the draft from the hallway. "I'll have the contractors here at 7 tomorrow," Caleb said. Before Shirley could respond, a voice called out from the far end of the hall. "Shirley? Is that you?" A young man with messy blonde hair and a backpack jogged toward them. It was Leo, Shirley's younger brother. He looked tired, his hoodie wrinkled. Behind him walked another man, taller, with a sharp nose and eyes that moved too fast. "Leo?" Shirley stepped forward, her protective instincts spiking. "What are you doing here? It's nearly midnight." "I lost my keys, Shirl," Leo said, rubbing the back of his neck. "And the dorms are doing a surprise fire drill. This is Mark. He's in my Psych 101 class. He gave me a lift." The man named Mark nodded. He wore a pleasant smile, but Caleb shifted. Shirley felt the temperature in the hall drop. Caleb's nostrils flared. He took a slow, deliberate step in front of Shirley, his hand resting on the hilt of the flashlight she had left on the side table. Caleb's thought, "The boy is clean, but the one behind him reeks. It's the smell of bitter ash and old sweat. He's a spy, and he just walked right to her front door." "Mark, is it?" Caleb's voice was like rolling thunder. It had that low vibration Shirley recognized now. "Yeah, just helping a friend," Mark said. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He looked at the boarded-up door. "Rough neighborhood?" "It's getting rougher," Caleb said. He didn't blink. "Leo, go inside. Your sister has things to do." "Wait, Caleb, what's wrong?" Shirley asked, sensing the tension. She reached out to touch his arm, but his muscles were like granite. "Mark should leave," Caleb stated. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Mark's posture changed. He didn't scurry away. He stood his ground, his gaze darting to the broken door and then back to Caleb. "I was just hoping for a glass of water before the drive back." "The pipes are out," Shirley said, picking up on Caleb's lead. She moved to Leo's side and grabbed his arm. "Thanks for the ride, Mark. Good night." Mark lingered for a second too long, his eyes locking onto the lead-lined box Shirley had left on her kitchen counter, the one containing Caleb's father's watch. Then he turned and walked away. As soon as Mark turned the corner of the stairwell, Caleb grabbed his phone. "Gideon, we have a tail. Silver SUV, plates ending in 59. He's a rogue scout. Intercept him before he hits the main road. Do not let him signal back." Leo looked between his sister and the giant man in her living room. "Shirl? Who is this guy? And why is he talking like a spy movie?" "He's my boss, Leo," Shirley said, though her heart was hammering. "And he's very, very picky about who comes to my house." Chapter 11. The night didn't get quieter. Within 10 minutes, 2 more men from Caleb's security team arrived. They didn't wear suits. They wore tactical vests and boots. They took positions in the hallway, their faces grim. "They're moving Leo to the campus," Caleb said. He was pacing the living room, his boots crunching on the glass shards from the broken coffee table. "What? No!" Shirley stood in his path. "You can't just kidnap my brother!" "I'm not kidnapping him. I'm protecting him," Caleb snapped. He stopped and looked at her, his eyes glowing. "That man, Mark, he wasn't a student. He smelled like the man who tried to kill you last night. Huxley is using your family to get to us, Shirley. If Leo stays here, he's a pawn." Leo sat on the sofa, clutching Pixie. The dog was surprisingly calm, sensing the gravity of the room. Shirley, I don't know what's happening, but those guys in the hall look like they mean business. Maybe I should go? Shirley looked at her brother, then at Caleb. She saw the raw worry in Caleb's eyes. He wasn't being bossy for the sake of it. He was terrified for her. Fine, Shirley said. But I go with him. We stay together. Agreed, Caleb said. They moved fast. Shirley grabbed a bag and threw in her laptop, her tools, and Caleb's silver watch, while Leo scooped up a grumbling Pixie. They headed down the back stairs to avoid any other scouts. They reached the street level where Caleb's security sedans were parked, but Caleb shook his head. Too easy to spot, he said. Get in the SUV. They roared toward the Thorntech campus. Halfway there, a dark car pulled out from a side street, its headlights off. It accelerated, aiming for the SUV's rear bumper. "Hold on!" Caleb shouted. He didn't swerve. He slammed the brakes, causing the following car to jerk to the side. Then, Caleb floored it. A second car appeared from a narrow alley, trying to box them in. "Shirley, get down!" Caleb roared. The side window of the SUV shattered as something hit it, a heavy metal bolt. Shirley shoved Leo to the floor of the back seat and threw her body over him. Suddenly, the night erupted in howls. 3 towering wolves, dark as the shadows they emerged from, leaped over the hood of a parked truck. They didn't hit the SUV. They hit the rogue cars. One wolf smashed through a windshield with the force of a wrecking ball. Another ripped the door clean off the lead rogue car. It was over in seconds. The rogue cars spun out, crashing into the concrete barriers of the industrial park. Caleb didn't stop to look. He drove through the gates of the campus as the heavy steel bars slammed shut behind them. Caleb's thought, "They're testing our borders. They know she's the key. I have to lock this down before Huxley realizes how much she means to me." Chapter 12. The safe room at the Thorntech campus was more comfortable than Shirley expected. It was a large suite with a kitchen, plush sofas, and a wall of monitors. Leo was fast asleep on one of the beds, exhausted by the adrenaline. Pixie was curled up on his chest, her little snores the only sound in the room. Caleb sat at a small table in the corner. He had stripped off his torn jacket and he was staring at a screen showing the perimeter feed. He looked weary, the lines around his eyes deeper than they had been at dinner. Shirley walked over, carrying 2 mugs of tea. She set one in front of him. "The healer said you should rest. You're pushing yourself." "I can't rest while my people are out there cleaning up the mess I started," Caleb said. He didn't look at the tea. "You didn't start the mess. Huxley did," Shirley said. She saw an old gaming console tucked under the monitor. It was a vintage system, the kind with chunky controllers. "Hey, do you know how to play Star Racer 90? Caleb looked at the console, then back at her. "Gideon uses it to blow off steam. I've never tried it." "Good," Shirley said, a mischievous spark in her eyes. "Because I'm a pro. And you look like you need to lose at something. It'll build character." She hooked up the system and handed him a controller. Caleb held it like it was a delicate bird. "The green button is gas, the red one is brakes. Don't hit the walls," Shirley explained. For the next hour, the Alpha of the Crimson Crest was humbled by a 16-bit racing game. Caleb was terrible. He kept driving his pixelated car into the grass, his large thumbs fumbling with the tiny buttons. Every time he crashed, he let out a frustrated growl. But by the 3rd race, he was leaning forward, his eyes locked on the screen. Wait, I'm catching up!" Caleb shouted as his car neared hers. "In your dreams, Thorn," Shirley laughed, sideswiping his car and sending him into a spin. Caleb dropped the controller and leaned back, a genuine laugh breaking through his fatigue. He looked at Shirley, his amber eyes bright with a different kind of fire. "You cheated," he accused, but his voice was warm. "I used strategy," Shirley corrected. "It's about accountability, remember? You didn't watch your flank." The laughter died down, leaving a comfortable silence. Caleb reached out, his hand hovering near hers on the table. He didn't touch her, but she could feel the heat. "Thank you, Shirley," he said softly, "for tonight, and for not running away." "I told you," she said, her voice dropping. "I finish what I start. And we're just getting started." Shirley's thought, "He's not a beast. He's just a man trying to carry the weight of the world, and for some reason, he wants me to help him hold it." Chapter 13. The safe room felt too small for the truth. Caleb stood in the center of the training floor, a reinforced area of the campus with thick rubber mats and steel-reinforced walls. Leo was still asleep in the adjoining suite, but Pixie was wide awake. The tiny dog sat on a bench, her head tilting left and right as she watched the giant man strip off his white shirt. Shirley leaned against the cold metal doorframe. She held the lead-lined box containing his father's watch like a shield. "You don't have to do this, Caleb. I believe you. I saw the wolves in the street." Caleb shook his head. His bare chest was a map of muscle and the 3 gashes Elena had treated. The blue ointment had turned to a thin, clear film. "Believing is different from knowing, Shirley. If we're going to work together, if you're going to be part of this, you need to see the beast. You need to know what lives under my skin." He took a deep breath. His eyes, already amber, began to burn with that molten gold light. Then the sound started. It was a wet, sickening crack. Shirley winced, her stomach turning. It sounded like someone snapping dry branches, but she knew it was his ribs. His spine buckled, lengthening with loud pops that echoed off the high ceiling. Caleb didn't scream. He let out a low, guttural grunt, his fingers digging into the rubber mats. His skin seemed to ripple and stretch. Dark fur, the color of a midnight storm, erupted from his pores. His face lengthened, the human features melting away into something wild and sharp. His teeth grew, clicking together as his jaw reshaped itself. It wasn't a magic trick. It was a brutal, physical overhaul. Shirley watched, her breath hitching, as the man she had just played video games with disappeared. In his place stood a wolf the size of a small horse. He was a mountain of muscle and fur, his shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway. His gold eyes stayed fixed on hers, intelligent and piercing. Shirley's thought, "I've spent my life fixing gears and wires, but no machine on earth is as terrifying or as beautiful as what just happened to his bones." The wolf took a step toward her. His claws clicked on the mats. He was huge, his presence so thick it felt like the air in the room had gained weight. Shirley didn't move. She didn't run. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling just a little. The wolf lowered his giant head, huffing a breath of hot air against her palm. He smelled like sandalwood, rain, and wild earth. He was hot. His body temperature felt like a furnace against her skin. He leaned his head into her hand, a soft whine vibrating in his chest. "You're still in there," Shirley whispered. The wolf blinked. He stepped back and began the process in reverse. The cracks and pops returned. Within minutes, Caleb was back on all fours, then sitting up, gasping for air. He was drenched in sweat, his human skin pale and steaming in the cool air of the gym. Shirley stepped forward and draped a spare towel over his shoulders. "Does it always hurt that much?" she asked. You get used to the sting, Caleb rasped, wiping his face. But the first time is a punch to the gut. It reminds you that you aren't just a man in a suit. Chapter 14. Shirley helped Caleb back to the safe room suite. He moved slowly, his muscles stiff from the forced change. She sat him down on the edge of the bed and went to work. This wasn't about security systems or watch gears. This was about the man. She pulled back the towel to check the gashes on his chest. They were already closing, the edges knitting together with a speed that defied logic. But as she cleaned away the sweat, she saw them. The other marks. Near his collarbone, there was a jagged, silvery white scar that looked like a lightning bolt. Lower down, on his ribs, was a thick, raised patch of skin that didn't match the smooth muscle around it. "Silver?" Shirley asked, her voice low. Caleb nodded. He leaned back on his elbows, watching her. "A gift from a rogue pack 5 years ago. Silver doesn't heal like other wounds. It leaves a permanent mark. It's a reminder of every time I failed to see a threat coming." Shirley traced the edge of the scar on his ribs. It felt cold compared to the rest of his skin. "You talk about failure a lot for a guy who runs a billion-dollar company and a whole pack." "The company is easy," Caleb said. He looked at Pixie, who had hopped onto the bed and was now sniffing his bandaged chest. "If a server crashes, I lose money. If the pack fails, I lose family. The financial impact of a bad call is just a number on a page. The impact of a silver blade is much more permanent." Shirley thought about the silver watch in the box. "Is that why you want the watch fixed? Because it's a piece of silver you actually want to keep?" "It's the only thing my father had that wasn't a burden," Caleb said. "He was the alpha before me. He was a hard man. He didn't believe in humor or shyness, but he loved that watch. He said it reminded him that even the strongest heart has to keep time." Shirley felt a tug in her chest. She realized she was staring at him, at the way his hair fell over his forehead and the vulnerability in his amber eyes. Caleb's thought, "She's looking at my scars like they're a map she wants to learn. And for once, I don't feel the need to cover them up." "I'll have it ticking by tomorrow," Shirley promised. "I need my tools from the shop, though. I can't do fine work with the travel kit." Caleb's expression hardened. "The shop isn't safe, Shirley. Huxley knows you work there. He probably has eyes on the street." "Then we go together," Shirley said, standing up. "Accountability, Caleb. You can't keep me in a bubble. My business is how I take care of myself. I'm not letting a rogue wolf take that away from me." Caleb sighed, a sound of deep frustration. "Fine. But we take the enforcers, and we stay for 10 minutes, not a second longer." Chapter 15. The next morning, the sun over Azure Heights was bright and unforgiving. Caleb, Shirley, and 2 large enforcers named Silas and Jax piled into a fresh, undamaged pack SUV. They drove to Shirley's shop in silence. The street was quiet, but Caleb's eyes never stopped moving, scanning the rooftops and the parked cars. They pulled up to the curb. Shirley's shop looked normal from the outside, but as they got closer, she saw it. Parked right in front of her door was her lavender mist Kia Rio. She had left it at the campus garage, or so she thought. But there it was, sitting under the morning sun. "Wait," Shirley said, her hand on the door handle. "How did my car get here?" Caleb's growl was low and dangerous. "Stay in the car." He stepped out, followed by Silas and Jax. They approached the Kia. Shirley watched through the glass, her heart hammering. The car looked fine, until Caleb reached the driver's side. Tied to the antenna with a piece of dirty twine was a dead crow. Its black wings were spread wide, and its beak was shoved into a small, blood-stained envelope. Caleb ripped the envelope away. He didn't open it. He just smelled it. His face twisted in a snarl. Huxley. What does it say? Shirley asked, jumping out of the SUV despite Silas trying to block her. Caleb handed her the note. It was a single sheet of heavy paper. The handwriting was jagged and hurried. The lavender girl has a pretty scent. It would be a shame to see it fade. Give me the encryption keys, Thorn, or I'll start sending you pieces of her instead of birds. Shirley felt a chill wash over her. It wasn't just a shock. It was a cold, sharp realization. Her car, her sanctuary, had been used as a mailbox for a death threat. The lavender mist paint, which she had always found calming, now felt like a target. He was inside the campus garage, Caleb said, his voice shaking with rage. He bypassed our security to move your car. He's showing us that nowhere is safe. He wants the keys, Shirley said, her mind racing. The backdoor exploit I found. He's the one using it. He's trying to get into the PAC's private records, names, addresses, bank accounts. We're going back, Caleb ordered. He grabbed Shirley's arm, his grip firm but not painful. Silas, get the car towed back to the campus. Jax, sweep the shop for bugs, now! Shirley's thought. He's trying to be the shield again, but he's shaking. He's more scared for me than he is for himself, and that makes him reckless. They scrambled back into the SUV. As they sped away, Shirley looked back at her shop. The door was still locked, but it felt like a grave. She looked at the lead-lined box in her lap. The silver watch felt heavier than ever. Chapter 16. Back at the Thorn Tech campus, the atmosphere had shifted from safe to prison. Caleb had moved Shirley and Leo to a higher floor, a suite with no windows and doors that only opened with his thumbprint. He had stationed 4 enforcers outside the door. He wouldn't let Shirley go to the kitchen without a guard. "This is ridiculous!" Shirley shouted. She was pacing the plush carpet of the suite. "I'm a security designer, Caleb. I know a gilded cage when I see one. You're locking me in a box." Caleb stood by the heavy oak desk, his arms crossed. "It's a secure box. Huxley moved a car from my private garage. He is inside my house, Shirley. Until I find the leak, you stay here." "I have work to do," she countered. "I have your father's watch in pieces on that table. I need to finish the patch for your servers." "The servers can wait. The watch can wait. Your life cannot," Caleb said. He looked exhausted. "I'm doing this for you." "No, you're doing this for you," Shirley snapped. "Because you can't handle the idea of something you can't control. You want accountability? Account for the fact that I'm a human being, not a trophy you can put in a vault." Caleb didn't answer. He turned and walked out, the heavy door clicking shut with a finality that made Shirley want to scream. She heard the lock engage. She turned to the table where she had laid out her tools. She looked at her heavy-duty multi-tool. It had a file, a saw, and a set of precision picks. "Leo, stay here and watch Pixie," Shirley said, her eyes narrowing. "What are you doing, Shirl?" Leo asked, looking up from his tablet. "I'm taking back my freedom," she said. She walked to the vent in the corner of the ceiling. It was a standard high-end HVAC cover. She used the screwdriver attachment on her multi-tool to remove the 4 screws in record time. She was small and athletic. The ductwork was narrow, but it led to the service corridor. Shirley's thought. He thinks he's the only one who knows how to bypass a Series 4 system. He's about to find out that a woman with a plan and a multi-tool is more dangerous than any rogue wolf. She pulled herself into the vent, the cool metal pressing against her back. She crawled through the dark, the smell of dust and clean air filling her nose. She reached a junction and kicked out the second grate. She dropped into the service hallway, landing softly on her feet. She wasn't running away from the campus. She was heading to the basement. She knew where the servers were, and she knew that if she could finish the patch, she could track Huxley's signal back to his hideout. She didn't need an alpha to protect her. She needed a clear line of sight and her own 2 hands. Chapter 17. The air inside the vents was thin and tasted like dust and dry metal. Shirley clambered through the narrow space, her elbows scraping against the galvanized steel. She kept her breathing shallow. Every time she moved, the metal beneath her let out a low, hollow thrum that felt like a thunderclap in the silence. Shirley's thought, I'm crawling through a building's lungs just to prove a point to a man who thinks he's a king. But if I hit a dead end, I'm just a very expensive rat in a trap. She pulled her mobile tablet from her waistband. The screen glowed, casting a blue light on the rivets of the duct. She had mapped the building's layout before Caleb locked her up. The server room was 2 floors down and 50 feet to the east. She reached a vertical shaft and gripped the ladder rungs welded to the interior. They felt cold and greasy. She descended, her boots making soft tinks against the iron. She reached the second junction and peered through the slats of the grate. Below her, the server room hummed with a life of its own. Rows of black towers stood like silent soldiers, their blinking green and red lights reflecting off the polished white floor. Shirley used the screwdriver on her multi-tool to back out the screws. She held the grate with one hand to keep it from crashing to the floor. Once it was free, she lowered herself down, hanging from the ledge before dropping into a crouch. The room was freezing. The cooling units blasted air to keep the processors from melting. Shirley hurried to the main terminal. She plugged her tablet into the maintenance port. "Okay, Caleb, let's see what you're so afraid of," she whispered. The screen flickered. She bypassed the first 3 layers of encryption in seconds. She wasn't looking for pack names. She was looking for the backdoor exploit. She found it. A jagged line of code that looked like a scar on the system's face. It was still active. Someone was currently siphoning data from the perimeter sensors. She began to write a patch, her fingers dancing across the glass. She didn't just want to close the door. She wanted to lock the thief inside. Chapter 18. You know, the vents are usually cleaned on Tuesdays. Shirley nearly jumped out of her skin. She spun around, her tablet clattering against the terminal. Standing by the heavy reinforced door was Elena, the healer. She wasn't holding a weapon. She held a tray with 2 cups of herbal tea and a small bowl of blue ointment. "How did you know I was here?" Shirley asked, her heart hammering. "I'm a wolf, dear," Elena said, walking forward with a calm smile. "I can smell the bergamot from your shampoo 3 floors away. And Caleb's temper is so loud right now, I needed a quiet place to sit." Elena set the tea on a server rack. She looked at Shirley's tablet. "You're fixing his mess." "I'm finishing my job," Shirley corrected. "He thinks he can protect me by stopping me from doing what I'm good at. That's not protection. That's an insult." Elena nodded, her silver hair catching the red light of the servers. "Caleb is an alpha. His instinct is to be the shield. But a shield that covers everything eventually smothers the person it's meant to save." She picked up a small glass vial from her tray. Inside was a dried purple flower. "This is wolfsbane. To us, it's a toxin. It slows our hearts and clouds our minds." She then pointed to a silver ring on her finger. "And this is silver. It's the only thing that can truly end us. Caleb fears these things, but he fears losing his mate even more. "I'm not his mate," Shirley said, though the words sent a strange shiver through her. "Your sense says otherwise," Elena replied. "But listen to me, Shirley. If Huxley comes, he won't use claws. He'll use these." She handed Shirley a small leather pouch. Inside is a paste made from crushed wolfsbane and a needle of pure silver. If Caleb falls and the enforcers are busy, you use this. Aim for the base of the skull or the heart. Shirley took the pouch. It felt heavy for its size. "You're giving me a way to kill a werewolf?" "I'm giving a brave woman a tool," Elena said. "Because an alpha might be the muscle, but the Luna is the one who keeps the pack from burning down." Shirley's thought, "She's handing me a death sentence in a leather bag, and she's looking at me like I'm the one who's going to save the day." Chapter 19. The peace of the server room shattered when every red light in the room suddenly turned bright, solid purple. A low, grinding groan echoed through the floorboards. The hum of the cooling units died, replaced by a deafening silence. Then, the emergency lights kicked in, a pulsing, strobe-like amber that made the shadows dance. "The grid," Shirley said, her eyes wide. "He didn't hack the encryption. He hacked the power bypass." "Get to the safe room," Elena said, her voice losing its warmth. She shifted her stance, her eyes flashing gold. "The rogues are inside the perimeter." Shirley didn't argue. She grabbed her tablet and the pouch Elena gave her. She didn't go back through the vents. She ran for the stairs. The hallway was a chaos of motion. Enforcers lunged past her, their shirts tearing as they began to shift mid-run. The air smelled of sour sweat and bitter ash. She reached the executive floor just as a blast shook the building. The elevator doors were bent outward, smoke pouring from the shaft. Shirley scrambled toward the high-security suite where she had left Leo and Pixie. The 4 enforcers Caleb had stationed there were gone. One lay on the floor, his throat torn open. The door, the Series 4 biometric masterpiece, was hissed open. "Leo!" Shirley screamed. She burst inside. The room was trashed. The desk was flipped and his father's watch lay scattered across the rug in 100 silver pieces. Leo was backed into a corner, holding a heavy chair like a shield. Pixie was a white blur, snarling and snapping at the ankles of a man who looked like he had been stitched together from nightmares. It was Mark, the student from the hallway. His eyes were a muddy, sick yellow. "Stay back!" Leo shouted, his voice cracking. Mark laughed, a wet, guttural sound. He lunged, but Shirley didn't think. She swung her heavy steel flashlight with every ounce of strength she had. It connected with the side of Mark's head with a sickening thud. Shirley's thought, "I'm not a fighter, but if he touches my brother, I'll turn this flashlight into a permanent part of his skull." Chapter 20. Mark staggered, his hand clutching his bleeding temple. He turned on Shirley, his teeth lengthening into fangs. Before he could strike, a dark shadow burst through the doorway. It was Caleb. He was in his wolf form, a hulking beast of dark fur and golden rage. He tackled Mark, the two of them crashing through the drywall and into the corridor. Shirley grabbed Leo's hand. "Go! Get to the healer's lab! It's reinforced!" "What about you?" Leo yelled over the sound of the fight. "I have to help him!" Shirley pushed him toward the stairs. Pixie followed Leo, her tail tucked but her teeth still bared. Shirley turned back to the hallway. The fight was brutal. Caleb was stronger, but he was slow. He was limping. Shirley saw the glint of silver in Mark's hand, a long, jagged blade. Mark lunged, sinking the silver into Caleb's shoulder. Caleb let out a howl of pure agony that made Shirley's skin crawl. He collapsed, his wolf form flickering as the silver poison hit his blood. Mark stood over him, raising the blade for the heart. Shirley looked around. A heavy maintenance cart from the building's recent HVAC upgrades was sitting in the hallway. Sticking out of the top was a 3-foot length of steel pipe. She lunged for it. The metal was cold and heavy. She gripped it with both hands, her knuckles white. Mark didn't see her coming. He was too focused on his prize. Shirley swung. She didn't aim for the head. She aimed for the back of his knees. The pipe connected with a bone-shattering crack. Mark screamed, his legs buckling. As he fell, Shirley swung again, this time bringing the pipe down on his wrist. The silver blade clattered to the floor. Caleb groaned, his amber eyes clouded with pain. Mark tried to crawl toward the blade, but Shirley stepped on his hand, the heel of her boot grinding into his knuckles. "Accountability," she hissed, her voice cold as ice. "You don't get to touch what's mine." She raised the pipe for a final blow, but the sound of boots filled the hall. Gideon and a squad of enforcers rounded the corner. They took one look at the scene, the bleeding alpha, the broken rogue, and the petite woman standing over them with a bloody steel pipe. "We've got him," Gideon said, his voice full of stunned respect. "Healers, get in here!" Shirley dropped the pipe. It hit the floor with a heavy clang. She sank to her knees beside Caleb, her hands trembling as she reached for his face. "You're okay," she whispered, her voice finally breaking. "I've got you." Caleb's thought, she didn't run. She didn't hide. She broke a monster to save a beast. I've found my Luna, and she carries a steel pipe. Chapter 21. The executive wing of Thorn Tech smelled of charred copper and the bitter ash of rogue lies. Caleb lay on the floor, his breathing a series of ragged, wet hitches. The silver blade Mark had used was gone, kicked away by Gideon, but the poison remained. A dark, jagged stain spread across Caleb's shoulder, the skin around it turning a sickly, bruised purple. "Healers, now!" Gideon roared. He didn't look like a businessman in a blue suit anymore. He looked like a cornered beast, his eyes a steady, predatory gold. Elena arrived within seconds. She didn't waste time with words. She knelt in the debris, her hands glowing with a soft, warm light as she pressed a thick blue paste into Caleb's wound. Caleb let out a strangled groan, his heels drumming against the carpet. "Hold him down!" Elena barked. Shirley stepped forward. She didn't have the strength of an enforcer, but she had the focus of a technician. She gripped Caleb's uninjured hand, her small fingers locking between his. "Caleb, look at me. Stay right here." Caleb's eyes flickered between human amber and the wild gold of his wolf. He focused on Shirley, his jaw tight enough to crack bone. The blue paste hissed against the silver-burned flesh, drawing out a thin, black vapor that smelled like rotting metal. Shirley's thought, "He's the strongest man I've ever met, and right now, he's as fragile as a watch spring. I won't let him break." "The silver's out," Elena panted, her forehead beaded with sweat. "But the damage is deep. He needs the lab. Jax, Silas, get him onto the stretcher." As the enforcers lifted Caleb, Shirley looked back at the trashed suite. The silver heirloom watch lay scattered in 100 pieces across the rug. The crystal was powdered dust. The gears were bent. To anyone else, it was trash. To Shirley, it was a debt that needed paying. She didn't follow the stretcher immediately. She knelt on the floor and began to gather the pieces. She used her multi-tool's magnetic tip to pick up the tiny screws and springs. She placed them carefully into the lead-lined box. "Shirley, we have to move," Gideon said, his hand on her shoulder. "Huxley isn't finished. That rogue was just the distraction." "Then finish it," Shirley said, standing up. She clutched the box to her chest. "But tell Caleb I'm not leaving. I'm going to the lab with Elena, and I'm bringing his father's watch." Gideon looked at the bloody steel pipe on the floor, then back at Shirley. He bowed his head. "The Gamma is already tracking the rest of the scouts. We'll end this tonight." Chapter 22. The healer's lab was a fortress of white tile and the scent of crushed herbs. Caleb lay on a raised table, his chest bare. The gashes from the previous night were almost gone, but the shoulder wound remained a raw, red crater. Elena worked with a quiet intensity, stitching the muscle back together with a needle that hummed with a low frequency. Shirley sat on a stool in the corner. She had cleared a small space on a metal tray and laid out the pieces of the silver watch. She didn't have her professional loupe, so she used a magnifying glass from Elena's supply kit. The silence in the room was heavy. The only sounds were the beep of the heart monitor and the tiny clink of Shirley's tweezers. "You should sleep, Shirley," Elena said without looking up. "The adrenaline will wear off soon, and you'll hit a wall." "I'll sleep when the watch ticks," Shirley replied. She straightened a tiny brass gear that had been crushed by Mark's boot. "And when Caleb opens his eyes." As if on cue, Caleb shifted. He let out a low, dry cough. His eyes opened, landing first on the sterile ceiling, then drifting to the side until they found Shirley. You stayed," he rasped. His voice was a ghost of its former power. "I have a contract, remember?" Shirley said, trying to keep her voice light. She walked to his side, still holding the tweezers. "Accountability. I can't leave a job half done." Caleb reached out with his good arm, his fingers brushing the sleeve of her dust-covered blouse. "The rogue. Mark. He's in the holding cells," Elena interjected, finishing the last stitch. "And Huxley is trapped. Our Gamma and the enforcers have boxed his cars into the industrial canal. It's over, Caleb." Caleb closed his eyes, a long, shuddering breath escaping his lungs. He looked at the tray on the stool. "The watch. It's a wreck." "It's just pieces," Shirley said. She leaned over him, her scent of mint and bergamot cutting through the medicinal smell of the lab. "And I'm very good at putting pieces back together. Even yours." Caleb's thought. "I tried to lock her in a cage to keep her safe, and she ended up being the one to pull me out of the dark. I don't deserve her, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to." Chapter 23. 2 hours later, the campus was quiet. The rogues had been captured or driven off. Leo was asleep in a guest room guarded by Pixie, who refused to leave the foot of his bed. Caleb was back in his private quarters, not the safe room, but his actual bedroom. It was a large space with dark wood floors and a wall of glass that looked out over the city. He sat in the low armchair, a blanket draped over his legs. Shirley stood by the window. She had cleaned the dust from her face, but her eyes were ringed with exhaustion. The lead-lined box sat on the coffee table between them. "I finished it," she said. She picked up the watch. It was silver, gleaming under the soft amber lights of the room. She pressed the small button on the side. Tick, tick, tick. The sound was tiny, but in the quiet room it sounded like a heartbeat. Caleb took the watch from her, his fingers careful not to touch the silver for too long. He looked at the face, the hands moving with perfect precision. "It hasn't worked in 10 years, he whispered. "I had to painstakingly rebend the escape wheel," Shirley explained, her voice soft. "But the core is the same. It just needed someone to care enough to fix the alignment." Caleb set the watch back in the box. He looked at Shirley, his amber eyes burning with a palpable intensity. "I was wrong, Shirley. About the cage, about everything. I thought being an alpha meant carrying the weight alone. I didn't realize that a real partner carries the pipe when the shield falls." Shirley walked toward him. She didn't stop until she was standing between his knees. The chemistry between them was a physical thing, a pull that felt like gravity. "I don't want to be protected, Caleb. I want to be respected. I want a man who knows that I can handle the dark just as well as he can." Caleb reached up, his hand cupping the back of her neck. He pulled her down until their foreheads touched. "I respect you more than any wolf in this pack. I want you, Shirley, not as a guest, not as a consultant, as mine." Shirley didn't hesitate. She leaned in, her lips meeting his in a kiss that tasted of sandalwood and the lingering heat of a hard-won victory. It wasn't shy. It was a surrender of the heart, a promise made in the quiet aftermath of a war. Shirley's thought, "He's not a beast to be tamed. He's a man to be loved." And for the first time, I'm not afraid of the fire. Chapter 24. The morning sun hit the lavender mist Kia Rio as it sat in the driveway of the Thorn Tech campus. The antenna was still a bit bent, and the lavender paint had a few new scratches, but it was clean. Shirley stood by the driver's door, her bag over her shoulder. She looked at the building where the windows were already being replaced by a team of fast-moving contractors. Caleb walked out to meet her. He was moving with a slight limp, but the color had returned to his face. He wasn't wearing a suit. He had on a dark sweater and jeans. "You're going back to the shop?" he asked. "I have a door to replace," Shirley said, a sassy tilt to her head. "And a coffee table to buy. I hear the Alpha of the Crimson Crest has a very generous credit line." Caleb laughed, a rich, lively sound. "Consider it a down payment on the new security system you're going to design for this entire campus. I want accountability, Shirley. Every door, every vent." "I'll send you the invoice," she teased. From the passenger seat of the Kia, a white blur let out a sharp, demanding bark. Pixie was sitting on the dashboard, her tiny nose pressed against the glass. "And her?" Caleb asked, gesturing to the dog. "Is she coming back for more of my shoes?" "Pixie is a professional," Shirley said. "She only bites the ankles of people she likes. Consider it a compliment." Caleb leaned down and kissed her one last time, a lingering, intoxicating moment that made Shirley's toes curl inside her boots. "I'll see you for dinner, at your place. I'll bring the pizza. You bring the steel pipe." "It's a date?" Shirley said. As she drove away, she looked in the rearview mirror. Caleb was still standing there, watching her. He looked strong, steady, and, for the first time, at peace. Shirley's thought, "I told him to bite me, and instead, he gave me the keys to his whole world. I definitely won this negotiation." The story of the Bite Me Alpha and the girl with the lavender car was just beginning. Chapter 25. Shirley parked the lavender mist Kia Rio in her usual spot. The gated lot felt different now. She scanned the shadows, her hand hovering over the heavy steel flashlight in her bag. The rogue threat was over, but her body hadn't quite received the memo. She stepped out, Pixie tucked under one arm like a fluffy football. The dog let out a sharp bark, her nose twitching as she sniffed the pavement for any trace of bitter ash. The hallway of her building smelled of sawdust and floor wax. Shirley stopped in front of her unit. The plywood sheet she had screwed into the frame was still there, looking rough and ugly against the hallway's white paint. She felt a surge of annoyance. She was a professional security designer, yet she was living behind a piece of construction scrap. "Okay, Pixie, time to get to work," Shirley muttered. She spent the next 4 hours with her drill and a set of heavy-duty hinges Caleb's team had dropped off earlier that morning. She didn't want a magic fix from a pack contractor. She wanted to do it herself. She measured the new oak door, her movements precise. She planed the edges until they were smooth, the curls of wood falling onto her rug like ribbon. By 3 o'clock, the door was hung. It clicked shut with a solid, satisfying thud. She ran her fingers over the wood, feeling the grain. It was stronger than the old one, reinforced with a steel core she had insisted on. Shirley's thought, "I can build a wall around my heart, or a door for my home." But somehow this man found a way to walk through both without even trying. She spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning. She swept up the glass shards from the coffee table. The frame was still there, but the glass top was a memory. She covered the empty space with a thick woven runner she had in the closet. It looked cozy, in a broken sort of way. The silver watch sat on her workbench. She had placed it back in the lead-lined box for safety, but she couldn't stop looking at it. It was ticking. The sound was steady, a tiny heartbeat in the quiet loft. It felt like a promise. As the sun began to dip behind the towers of Azure Heights, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Caleb. "On my way. Pizza is in the car. Pixie's favorite treats are in the bag. See." Shirley smiled. She tucked a stray hair back into her bun and checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. She looked tired, but her eyes had a spark she hadn't seen in years. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building something. Chapter 26. A knock sounded at the door. 3 steady, heavy raps. Shirley opened it to find Caleb standing in the hall. He looked better. The pallor was gone, replaced by a healthy glow, though he still favored his right side. He wore a dark, soft hoodie and jeans. In his left hand, he held 2 large pizza boxes. In his right, a brown paper bag that smelled of dried liver. "I see the door is back in business," Caleb said, his amber eyes sweeping over the new oak. "Nice work on the hinges." "I don't like holes in my life," Shirley said, stepping aside. "Come in, but keep your shoes on. I haven't found every piece of glass yet." Caleb walked in, his presence immediately making the loft feel smaller. He set the pizza on the covered coffee table. Pixie was already at his feet, her tail a blur of white motion. She knew that brown bag was for her. "She has you trained," Shirley noted, watching Caleb kneel, carefully, to give Pixie a treat. "She's an enforcer in a tiny body," Caleb replied with a grin. "I know better than to cross the person in charge." They sat on the floor by the coffee table, leaning against the sofa. The pizza was greasy and perfect, topped with everything that shouldn't be on a diet. Caleb told her about the final sweep of the canal. Huxley was in custody, facing a pack tribunal that would strip him of his rank and exile him. "So, it's really over?" Shirley asked. "The war is," Caleb said. He reached out and took her hand. His skin was hot, the internal furnace of the wolf still running high. "But the accountability part is just starting. I want to hire your firm, Shirley, not just for a patch. I want you to redesign the entire pack infrastructure. We need someone who isn't a wolf to tell us where our blind spots are." Shirley chewed on a crust, thinking, "It'll cost you. And I don't work for alpha rates. I want full creative control." "You already have it," Caleb whispered. He leaned in, his natural heat and the quiet intimacy filling the space between them. Caleb's thought, she's arguing about contracts while I'm trying to figure out how to tell her I want to wake up next to her every morning for the next 100 years. He kissed her, a slow, deep connection that felt like the final gear of a watch clicking into place. Shirley sighed against his lips, her hand tangling in the soft fabric of his hoodie. The loft was quiet, the only sound the steady tick of the silver watch on the workbench and the soft crunch of Pixie eating another treat. Chapter 27. The next morning brought a surprise Shirley didn't plan for. She was midway through her first cup of coffee when a fleet of black SUVs pulled up to the curb outside. "Caleb? Is your security detail having a meeting on my lawn?" she asked, looking out the window. Caleb, who was currently trying to figure out how to use her vintage toaster, looked over. He groaned. "It's not security. It's the ruling class." A moment later, the hallway was full of voices. Gideon, Elena, and the Gamma, a hulking man named Barrett, walked through the new door. They weren't there for a fight. Elena carried a basket of fresh bread and honey. Barrett held a crate of high-end tools. "We heard the Alpha was hiding out in a grape-colored car neighborhood," Gideon joked, eyeing the room. He looked at the runner-covered coffee table frame and winced. "We brought reinforcements." "This is my home, not a barracks," Shirley said, but she couldn't hide the smile. She liked Elena, and even Gideon's sass was starting to grow on her. Elena hugged Shirley. "The pack knows what you did. You saved the Alpha. In our world, that makes you more than a consultant. It makes you family." Barrett set the crate of tools on the floor. "I heard you broke a pipe over a rogue's head. If you ever want to join the Enforcer training sessions, the door is open." Shirley laughed. "I think I'll stick to the tech, Barrett. But thanks." The group stayed for an hour, filling the loft with a lively energy. They talked about the future, about how the pack needed to change to stay safe in a modern world. Caleb sat on the sofa, watching Shirley interact with his leaders. He looked proud. When they finally left, the loft felt quiet again, but it wasn't lonely. Shirley looked at the crate of tools. There was a new, high-end power drill and a set of precision screwdrivers. Shirley's thought, "I spent so long trying to be a one-woman island. I didn't realize that a pack isn't just a crowd. It's a foundation." "You okay?" Caleb asked, walking up behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I'm fine," she said. "But tell Gideon if he makes one more joke about my car, I'm going to hack his personal playlist and change everything to polka music." Caleb chuckled. "I'll give him the warning, but he'd probably enjoy it." Chapter 28. A week later. Life had settled into a new, fast-paced rhythm. Shirley was still living in her loft. She wasn't ready to give up her independence just yet. But Caleb was there most nights. They were sitting in the lavender mist Kia Rio, parked in the industrial park where they had first seen the wolves. The car had been detailed, the scratches polished out, and a new antenna installed. Shirley was showing Caleb the new perimeter sensors she had designed for the campus. "It uses a multi-spectrum scan," she explained, pointing to her tablet. "If a rogue so much as sneezes within a mile of the gate, we'll know the brand of tissue they're using." Caleb nodded, looking impressed. Accountability at its finest. Suddenly, Pixie, who had been napping in the back seat, stood up. She let out a sharp, commanding bark. She wasn't looking at the sensors. She was looking at Caleb. "What?" Caleb asked the dog. Pixie barked again, then hopped into the front seat and sat directly on Caleb's lap. She stared at him, her dark eyes unblinking. She wants her walk, Shirley said, stifling a laugh. And she wants it now. Caleb sighed. He looked at the petite dog, then at Shirley. I am the leader of the Crimson Crest. I have stared down rogue alphas. I have survived silver blades. And yet, I am being bullied by a 3-pound cloud of lint. She knows who the real boss is, Shirley teased. Caleb shook his head, but he opened the car door. He stepped out, and for a moment he paused. He looked at Shirley, his eyes full of a warmth that went deeper than any pack bond. I love you, Shirley Jones, he said. The words were simple, human, and direct. I know, Shirley said, a sassy grin spreading across her face. Now go walk the dog. Accountability, Caleb. As she watched him walk Pixie across the grass, the hulking alpha carefully holding a pink leash while a tiny white dog strutted ahead of him like a queen, Shirley knew she had finally found exactly what she was looking for. Shirley's thought, the gears are finally aligned. The time is perfect. She picked up the silver watch from the dashboard. It was ticking. It was steady. It was home. The end. Quick favor, Pack. Don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Shirley was brave for telling a billionaire alpha to bite me and then defending him with a steel pipe, wait until you meet the heroine in this next story on your screen. You have to hear this disaster unfold. Click the video on your screen right now. It is pure, unhinged chaos.